You are listening to Proof Text, a Glossa House podcast by Dr. T. Michael W. Halcomb, Dr. Fredrick J. Long, Dr. Mario Melendez, Dr. Jennifer Noonan, and J. M. Smith. Welcome and enjoy.
Hello and welcome to Proof Text. I'm Michael Halcomb. I'm here with Dr. Fred Long, and we're discussing Galatians. We are in Galatians 5, and we're heading right toward the end of the chapter. We still got a few verses left. We're at the fruit of the flesh part, and then we'll do the fruit of the spirit pretty soon. So, Fred, you doing all right?
I am. Thank you. I calculate that we have about 11 videos left after this one.
Really? All
Yeah.
right.
I'm pretty quick with the math. So, because chapter 6 has 18 verses?
You're
so
pretty
that's
optimistic too. Yeah.
That's 9 episodes. And then the rest of this chapter there's probably 2-3 episodes. And then today's. So we might have 13 left.
12 or 13, a baker's dozen. Well, that's where we're at. We're at Galatians 5. I'm going to put the Greek text up on the screen. So if you're watching, you have a little bit of an advantage over somebody just listening. But if you're listening, that's fine too. Here we go. I'm going to read in Greek, and then we'll discuss. So, here it is. Phanerade estin, ta erga te sarkos, atina estin, pornia, akatharsia, aselia, and that's in the middle of the list there. It stops at aselia. Just a few things I noticed straight away with this is you have a lot of the enclitic stuff going on. You have the estin. You have atina estin. I find the words with two accents on them like some of the hardest to pronounce in Greek. This one's pretty easy, atina estin, but they're not always that easy to do. So beware of those. You do want to, I try to stress both letters when the stresses fall on them. So atina estin. It's a little easier if you make sure you're including the following word. Atina estin. But it's not always easy. And then just, again, remember in the context or the environment of an epsilon following a gamma, the gamma takes on a Y sound. So aselia. And that's not easy to say either. Aselia. Aselia. The accent's not where I think a native English speaker would want it to be, which is on the ia. It's aselia. So those are the only things I have there. Remember also the is not pronounced with a hard D. It's the.
The.
Yeah, I'll stop there.
Phanerade estin ta erga te sarkos atina estin pornia akartharsia aselgia.
Yeah. You did exactly what I said. You put the stress on that next to last syllable.
Aselia. Aselia. All right. We see a the, which is distinctive development. I like moreover a lot. So verse 18 says, if you're led by the Spirit, you're not under the law. Moreover, manifest are the works of the flesh, which are immorality, sexual immorality, uncleanness, and licentiousness. So pretty straightforward here. You do have a third singular verb, estin, that works with a plural subject, which is neuter, a neuter plural. So this is just a rule in Greek. So third plural neuter subjects can take third singular verbs. And phaneura is a predicate adjective in agreement with the works, ta erga. So the works of the flesh. So the working out of the flesh. So the deeds that come from the flesh. So Paul is kind of talking about the notion of flesh as some kind of entity that is habituated evil and these desires and acted them out. So if someone is living in the flesh, they're living in the flesh as an end unto itself, which has its own frame of reference, which is
Mhm.
often there's a ceiling and there's a wall. So there's no God and there's no regard for people. So a fleshly entity that is viewed unto itself and is turned in on itself, like a hand turned
Yeah.
in on itself. That is the kind of flesh that he's talking about. He's talking about flesh that is sinful, turned in on itself, ceilinged and walled off. The deeds that come from this kind of living are manifest. You can't hide these kinds of things.
Yeah.
They work their way out. It's kind of a principle of inward out when it comes to these kinds of things. Jesus talks about you'll know them by their deeds, their fruit. You'll know them, even though they can be hidden. They can be wolves in sheep's clothing. This kind of comes out in certain verses. Still, there'll be times where it'll crack through. It's often depicted in movies, I think, in depicted when the evil guy, evil gal will they'll make mistakes, real obvious mistakes, and they'll become evident who they are. And of course, once you get to know them, you'll see, oh, their machinations are terrible. Now, sometimes it can be like a pitiful version of what this person really is. This is a spoiler. I'm telling you ahead of time. Voldemort, whatever his name is,
Voldemort.
Voldemort. Yes, I'm trying to be culturally relevant here. He's like this little baby that's just selfish. When we finally get to see what he's really, this is a spoiler to the Harry Potter series for those of you who've never heard of this series. So you get to see the inside of him. So his evil, though, is very evident. But then on the inside, he's just this hurt little, suffering little baby man type thing. And, so what motivates people to do what they do? Well, the problem is that when it comes to sin, is it wants to dominate you. It wants to take you over.
Yeah.
And it does so a little bit at a time. It'll take a little, it promises more than it can deliver. And it starts out small and it wants to consume you. Now, there are places, before we look at these vices, there are places where Paul talks about the kinds of people that will not inherit the kingdom of God. Ephesians 5:6, 1 Corinthians 6:7, right around there. And what's interesting is that he lists people who are known and identified by the sins that they do. When
Yes.
sin takes you over such that you become identified by your sin,
Yes.
you have no inheritance in God's kingdom. If that's what you want to identify as, if you can be called a thief, if you can become an idolater, if you can be called a homosexual offender, you can be called an adulterer. You have let that sin identify with you. It has become so habituated in through following the desires of your flesh that you become identified with that. Now, the good news is that the gospel will save you. Paul talks about people being saved out of that kind of lifestyle, out of those kind of desires. But it is a battle and a struggle. And so as we look at this, the deeds of the flesh, how they become manifest, just be thinking of whether these are going to take you over or not. They start little, but they want to take you over. And this is the nature of the evil one. When he possesses people, he takes them over. They become totally instrumentalized. When God takes us over, We are freed to be our unique, weird, odd, fun, funny selves. And this is our gifts to the world, is to be ourselves. And everyone is so unique. And God, when he takes us over and possesses us, we're actually enlivened to be ourselves. Whereas these vices, these desires want to consume us and take us over.
Yes.
So just as a
That's
framework, as we're looking at these vices, so
what
the deeds of the
Pride
flesh
Month
are
is,
manifest. Yeah,
right?
Michael.
I was just gonna say that's what Pride Month is.
Yeah,
It consumes people and takes
yeah,
them over,
yeah.
and it is taking pride in sinful activity. As I was just looking through this, I'd never thought this before, and I could be wrong, but I want to throw the theory out there as we start. What's he give? Like, I don't know, a dozen or so vices here?
No, it's like 20.
20? 2 dozen maybe? I wonder if actually every single one of these is related to sexual immorality. That may be a little bit of a stretch, but I don't think it's too hard of a stretch. Um,
Yeah, we'll talk about that. I think it's somehow the crown of them all because it entails most fundamentally our identities made in the image of God. In the image of God, he made them male and female, he made them. So the most beautiful, wonderful, powerful part of ourselves is in our maleness and our femaleness, our distinctiveness. And this is often most exercised or experienced sexually. And that is precisely where the evil one is deceiving us and attacking us and wants to pervert us at that point of most precious identification with being created in the image of God, male and femaleness. So yeah, I think there's something about it. It is the preeminent metaphor of God's people being faithful to God. Is
right.
the adultery imagery or the harlotry imagery. I mean, the Bible begins with a marriage, it ends with a marriage.
Yeah.
And so this is a huge metaphor of faithfulness to God.
Yeah.
And that's why I think that circumcision, part of circumcision is also a symbol of males. You better keep this in check.
Yeah.
I've got you marked out right here.
Yes. Exactly.
There is so much abuse carried out by men. I mean, it's not even funny. Um, I'm not saying that women are innocent. No, they do it in their own ways, but males perpetuate so much injury sexually. It's not even funny.
Yeah.
It's
I
terrible.
think
We're
we
so
talked about that.
lusty. And I get it, man. I'm a lusty guy. I get it. Like I understand. But we have perpetuated so much harm against women and others, ourselves, really, through this lusting that often wants to go towards sexual immorality, porneia, the Greek word porneia. Michael, sorry, I cut you off.
No, that's the next title of your next book, A Lusty Guy. Um,
I'm a lusty guy. A
your name
lusty
tag
guy.
at your next event instead of "Hello, I'm Fred." "Hello, I'm a lusty guy."
Yeah, if I was in like a 12-step sin recovery program,
Yeah.
that's what you'd have to start out by saying something like that.
Um, yeah, we've talked about that before too in Galatians, like how, yeah, like I got you marked right here, but that whole thing is meant, I think, to convey like you're my slave now, right?
Mm,
And how you
mhm.
use this matters as my slave. But
Yeah, this
let's just
part of
look at,
yourself. Yeah.
yeah, if we look at pornea, I take that to be just like sexual morality in general, kind of like a catch-all
Hmm.
term. And obviously, for those of you listening, you realize we get our word pornography from this, but
Yeah.
I think this is just a general umbrella term for sexual immorality in general. What do you
Yeah.
think?
No,
Yeah.
I think so. I think it's a general category. I think we need to go to Leviticus 18, where it talks about different kinds of prohibited sexual behaviors. Not all sexual, but it does come to a climax. Kind of sorry, that's a little pun intended, but there most of it is sexual immoralities and perversions. Although you do have offering your children to Moloch, which is an abomination, like a complete abomination, and probably is, in some ways, very much equivalent to abortion, where you're killing your child. So this kind of list of sexual perversions in Leviticus 18 are very significant. In fact, he says the land that you're going to occupy and the people that you're kicking out and often killing is because of their sinfulness. This is not because you're better than them, but because the land is spewing them out because of their wickedness, that they do these kinds of things. So we need to have a clear understanding that there are some moral absolutes, particularly when it comes to the sexual types of sexual immorality. And in Leviticus 18, you've got bestiality, you've got incest, you've got homosexual behaviors, and we don't want to keep harping on homosexuality. I mean, it's just one among many sins right now. I think we're heading towards polygamy, multiple spouses, open relationships, multiple spouses.
Really, polyamory. I mean, 'cause
Polyamory, that's what it's called. Yeah,
marriage is
polyamory.
like out of the question. People don't care about marriage.
Yeah, people don't care about marriage. Yeah, polyamory. Yeah, absolutely. And so this is very serious degradation of ourselves, of the image of God. Again, our sexuality is closely related to our image of God. And so porneia is huge. It starts the list. It often starts the list. Why is that? And I think that's why your impulse to say that maybe it's the fountainhead of the others, there may be something there to it. Why is it that Paul spends 4 chapters in 1 Corinthians reestablishing his authority and the nature of the gospel? And then the first thing that he confronts is porneia, someone of a type that's not even happening among the nations. And that is a man is sleeping with his stepmother. And he has to excommunicate this guy and says, you don't have the courage to do it. I do. In the presence of all, open this letter. We're going to read it, and we're going to hand him over to Satan so his flesh can be destroyed, but his spirit can be saved. So the goal is always restorative to his spirit, his inner self. But it's an extreme case because it's an extreme measure. I mean, sometimes you have to take extreme measure to save people. I mean, really, this is a kind of an intervention where you call together a bunch of people and you say, you're hurting yourself, and this is bad for us all. You need to stop. In fact, this is so bad and so unhealthy and dangerous. I mean, if the authorities find out about this, we're kicking you out of the community.
Yeah.
And now this person, I think, is forgiven. You can forgive. Look at 2 Corinthians 2. There's a process of forgiveness there that happens. And I think that's the same guy, same person, same scenario.
It is interesting. One of my old mentors, I caught up with him a couple weeks ago for a couple hours on the phone, and he was telling me about one of his daughters just went off to college and got sucked into all the LGBTQ stuff. And before she knew it, she was having a girlfriend, and before she knew it, she was engaging sexually with her, and and then living with her. And my friend, who's been in ministry a long time, he just said, I told her, as long as you're doing that, you're not welcome back home. And so for months, that went on, and he referred to her. He told her, you're my prodigal daughter, when you're ready to come back home, when you're ready to leave that behind, I'll welcome you back home with open arms. But until you've chosen to do that, you're not welcome back home. And to a lot of people, that would sound absolutely insane, especially in our culture. No, you're supposed to love your kids no matter what they do. And well, loving your kids, as we've talked about before, is different than affirming everything they're doing. Loving your kids is wanting God's best for them.
Yeah.
And, in his situation, this got her attention. And so he told me, after several months, she came back home and she wept and she asked her dad for forgiveness and she left that lifestyle and he welcomed her back with open arms.
Yeah.
And,
so that's a powerful story. It's hard to think about.
Yes.
So this is what happened in the Old Testament is God found himself in relationship with a people that were disobedient and idolatrous, which is hurtful for others. And so God is in a situation as well, what do? I'm in relationship with this people, but if I do nothing, they are condoned in what they're doing.
Yes.
That's a huge dilemma. What do I do? And he has to punish them. Yeah. He has to punish them or withdraw his presence from them, whatever. So how does this work historically versus relationally? In this case, there's a withdrawal of comfort and affirmation. You want to be affirmed in this. Oh, as a parent, I'll keep affirming you in this. That's not love. That's not wanting God's best for them. That is only condoning and encouraging what they're doing.
Yeah.
And so that the support network has to be removed, at least from what you can provide. Wow, that's a tough. That's not easy. I mean, I know friends that struggle with this, or I don't know if they struggle. Maybe they need to struggle, but it's not easy to have a child that is living in a homosexual lifestyle and relationship. Yeah. It's a real struggle. How do you love them? How do you relate to them in a way that is honoring to God and honoring to them?
Yeah. It's the same reason I would never attend a gay wedding, right? I would just not do it. I refuse to do it because it is a tacit affirmation or even an explicit affirmation of me saying, I don't want God's best for you. And I will let you choose what I'll be okay with and affirm that you get to choose what you think is God's best for you. Yeah, dude, it's a real struggle.
And this porneia is, we're now talking about like this form of it, but before then you have pornography, you have sleeping around, which is very common. Try the glove on before you buy it, so to speak. It's just very common. But even when I was in high school, college, there was a youth group gal who went to the same college I went, and she was just so happy that every night she was sleeping with another guy, and just like, man, and the opportunities to do that. People just randomly calling, and this was back in the 80s. What is it now? I don't know. You have all kinds of apps that make this easy to do, to hook up, to find people who want to mess around. The opportunities are there. And now with the internet, you can find anything you damn well please.
Yeah.
And I use that word in person. You can do that. And the thing is, it's not going to satisfy you. It's going to always promise more than it delivers. It's always going to take more than it gives. And it's going to leave you empty and wanting. That's because it's not how we're made. We're not made to engage in sexual immorality of these kinds. It's going to leave us wanting. So yeah, I think there is something about it being first, Michael, for sure. I love, so you can start to correlate these vice lists. For example, is it accidental that in 1 Thessalonians 4:3, Paul defines God's will? This is God's will. I'm quoting. This is God's will. Your sanctification.
Yes.
And then the next thing he says is to
Yes.
avoid sexual immorality, to avoid porneia. So God's will, sanctification, sexual morality. That is not accidental.
Yeah.
And so it's pervasive. It's the biggest economic business in the world. You combine all the other economic businesses and they don't match pornography online, pornography or whatever. Pornography is the biggest business. Yeah. The next vice. Go ahead. Yeah.
Well, I was going to say, akatharsia, and that may just be, impurity in general, but it actually can be related, especially to sexual sin. So this idea of depravity, foulness, lewdness. So that's why I think that there is some possibility that these are all related to porneia.
Yeah.
So, I wonder if it shouldn't be porneia, comma, but porneia, colon. And then we have a list.
I don't think so, because you do have the atina, estin porneia, which is a relative pronoun that is explaining the ta erga. So it's multiple things. It's not one thing then elaborated. But it is, it is privileged. It is put first often. And akatharsia, if I could add on to what you're saying, is construing cleanness, which imply, uncleanness, which implies cleanness. Cleanness is what belongs to the realm of the divine. So uncleanness profiles that which is not suitable for the divine. And it's often associated with idolatry. And idolatry is often associated with porneia. So you do have a network that's kind of swimming together. Sexual morality, different types, uncleanness, which is unsuitable for the divine, that which is dirty, refuse. So impurity. So basically stuff that is not fitting of divinity, not fitting of God. And of course, if we're children of God, then why would we want to have anything to do with what is unclean, what is improper for God? And then you have aselhia, licentiousness. What does this word mean? Here's a reading from BDAG, Bauer, Danker, Arndt, and Gingrich, our basic New Testament lexicon, although we have some other contenders now. Lack of self-constraint, which involves one in conduct that violates all bounds of what is socially acceptable. So this is obviously like abandoning yourself beyond the mores of a culture. Well, I think we're even beyond that now.
Well, again, look at Pride Fest. You have these people on floats. They're sometimes walking naked or riding the float naked, whipping each other with whips and doing all kinds of lewd stuff out in public. I think
they're going to schools and doing striptease things in schools.
Yeah, I've seen that. Yeah.
Yeah. Terrible.
I think that's what it is, this outrageous behavior that there's a title of a book that I saw recently that just nailed our culture for me. I think it was titled "Forgetting How to Blush," and I was like, "Wow, that really gets at what our culture is like. We've forgotten how to blush, how to be embarrassed, ashamed."
Yeah, some other words are impudence, insolence, coarseness. Immodest for sure. Well, verse 20, you want to read verse 20?
Yeah, I will. Idolatria, pharmakia, ekthre, eris, zelos, thumou, erithia, dicostasia, eresis.
Heresis.
20.
Yeah. So there we go. So so what's happening is you're getting a list, and what's going on is Paul has identified a folder. The works of the flesh are manifest, and this is like a folder. He's opening it up, and then he's saying which things are. So atina estin, which things are. And at this point, he begins listing. And so all these things are flooding into this folder. And so we've just started with the first three: sexual morality, uncleanness, licentiousness. The list continues: idolatry, magic, pharmakia, enmities, plural, interesting, strife, jealousy, anger outbursts, outrageous anger, selfish ambition, dissension, really double factionism, and factions. So it's interesting that you have some like repeats of ideas, like what's the difference between strife and, fighting and jealousy with angers. These are, they're starting to overlap. Factions and dissensions, they seem very similar, but each one of them is construing something slightly different, and we'd have to do like a word study on each of these to kind of try to understand how the readers would be understanding these kinds of concepts. So idolatry is huge. I think this is our fundamental problem, is that we worship the creation rather than the creator. The flesh, remember, is ceilinged and walled off and turned in on itself like a fist. That turning in is looking to that own self as a point of reference that is a kind of self-worship. Yeah.
I would tie this in some instances to sexual immorality as well. You have like these very sexual cults or sexual sects, or these various religious sects or social political sects that were involved in he'd say orgies and things like that. He actually used that word later, but so it could be roped into that. And as we're going through this, I'm going to keep trying to push in that direction. But,
yeah. I don't think you need to do that. I mean, you're obviously going to do what you need to do.
I'm exploring too, but also having translated pharmakia, I think there's some talk of this. Is it in Revelation? I think.
Yeah, it is.
I would not understand this as just merely as magic, but the way I talked about it in the Revelation commentary I'm working on was the taking of like drugs or drinking of like liquids like potions or certain types of alcohol that could lead to sexual immorality. So I think there is something there.
Or abortions. Yes, basically sorcery and magic involved like chemicals and elements and potions and mixtures to control outcomes. So that's why it is related to our, in English, pharmacy. But yeah, to think that this could be, certain dependencies on drugs or using them to certain ends. But yeah, we're dealing with like potions and different things. Hatreds in the plural, enmities.
That one's
factionalism.
That one's a little harder to tie to sexuality, perhaps.
Well, except often there's love triangle and
true.
There's a lot of fighting and killing and murders over love triangles.
You see what just happened here? Now you're defending it. I love that.
Well, I can think creatively. Eris, strife, contention, obviously that's related.
Yeah.
Jealousy, I mean, that's easy. outbursts of anger that's going on. I mean, sadomasochism and, just different, apparently people will need to be stimulated through that abuse. So they get a sexual high from that. Is really sad and tragic that kind of thing. So I don't know, I'm not buying with Michael's thesis. I can run with it. But yeah, these outbursts, and there's different words for anger. There's orge and thumos. Orge is more the outward, it profiles the outward outburst of it. The thumos, it more profiles the fierce, the feeling, emotion part of the anger. So, but it is in the plural. So maybe the ragings. We're like an outcrying culture right now.
Yeah, when I see that orge, I tend to think of separation rather than it's an outward thing. So when I think of God's wrath, like the way I define that is his absence. Like his anger is different than his wrath, right? For God to enact wrath is for God to be absent. He's removed.
Well, I think, we have to look at Revelation because both words are used in Revelation, right? So thumos and orge. Really
parse them out in my commentary.
Okay, cool.
I think it's really important to do that, to not conflate anger and wrath, and also not conflate judgment with those two, because they often kind of get thrown into the same pot, but it's two very different things. I think anger, right, is God's internal emotion.
Mm-hmm.
His wrath is he's fed up with what you've done and he's evacuating, and judgment is because he's evacuated you're going to now feel the consequences of your sins. I use this example in class a lot. If you think of like a lake, and then downstream the lake there's a dam, right? And I say that is the perfect picture to understand the differences between anger, wrath, and judgment. So like whenever we have that lake there, right, and we sin, and that angers God, and that lake, as it were, is like fills up with our sins and the consequences of our sin. But Christ is like there at the dam holding all the consequences of our sin, judgment, right, from rushing headlong onto us. And when God is internally finally fed up enough, he moves away. That's called wrath. And then like the consequences, the judgment of our sin comes headlong onto us, and we have to deal with it on our own.
Interesting. Helpful analogy. Erythea, a plural word. Let me see.
Rivalry,
strife, contentiousness. It's related to Eris, which he's mentioned earlier.
I love this definition. Party spirit.
Party spirits, yeah. And Aristotle, party except in the wrong way. And Aristotle in his Politics, and this is debated whether this is relevant or not, it denotes a self-seeking pursuit of political office, often by unfair means. So, but whether that has that meaning here, strife, contentiousness. So strife and contentiousness normally suggest a social environment as opposed to selfishness and selfish ambition, which more talks about my internal looking and trying to work things for myself. But if you start talking about contentiousness and strife, that usually is talking about conflict, implies conflict with other people. The next words, there's two more words in verse 20, dikostasia. So stasis, I see the stasis root, which has to do with like a revolt or a revolution. And the diko is kind of interesting. I don't know what that adds to it. The diko, that root, I have to look that up. What that's doing, is that meaning like a doubled? Dikostasia,
kind of dichotomy, right?
or like a separating out. So I think what it does is it strengthens the revolt in terms of creating like an oppositional uh, dissension, like the state of being in factious opposition, dissension. So dissensions. So somehow it's a little bit different than the previous word, and a little bit different from the next word, uh, esis, eresis, from which we
Heresis.
get the word heresies. Eresis. I can't say
Heresis.
that. Heresis.
Remember
Heresis.
that alpha iota is just the same as epsilon. So heresis.
Heresis. Yeah. I was struggling with trying to get the epsilons there at the beginning sounds. Heresies comes from this word. So party, sect, school, factions. So these three words kind of are overlapping, it seems like. We're talking about strife and struggle socially, politically, separating out, forming groups, schools, factions. So this kind
Splitting
of
churches.
splitting churches? Yeah, but I mean, sometimes Paul says you need factions.
Well, I'm saying for just in the leftist and centrist Methodists and Episcopalians and
Yeah,
all of those who rather than taking their agendas elsewhere have made
yeah,
it their life calling to instead
yeah,
divide and split the church.
yeah. In other words, to those who may not know about the United Methodist controversy, not that I'm an expert, but I do know this, is that the Book of Discipline was very clear that people shouldn't be ordaining
Mm-hmm.
people practicing homosexual practices and marrying people in homosexual relationships. The Book of Discipline prohibited that, and they tried to change that, and they couldn't. And then they just start blatantly acting in that way.
Yes.
And so they're the ones that are, rather than saying, we're just going to go elsewhere because we're in violation of the Book of Discipline, which is, a voted in body of doctrine, which is trying to be faithful to Scripture and our tradition. They instead repeatedly violated it to the point where then the church was deadlocked. And there was someone explained it to me. I don't understand all the ins and outs of it, but there was no way to ever resolve it unless it maybe could go to a global Methodist church vote of some kind. And that was even blocked. And so I just said, oh my goodness, this can never be resolved with the current Book of Discipline.
It's been going on since the 70s. I mean,
Yeah.
like they've been
Yeah.
pushing and
So who's dividing from whom? Yeah.
Yeah.
Who is the perpetrator? Yeah.
Well, the one that's committing the heresy.
The one that's committing the heresies. Yeah, that's right.
So, what do you want to do? 21? You want to save that for a later
I think we
episode?
should save it for next time, and then we'll have a nice kind of. Well, wait. No, we should probably finish it.
You want to?
Yeah.
We're about 45 minutes here.
Yeah, we should probably. Maybe we'll do it next time, and that way provide a little segue into the fruit of the Spirit. We'll be able to see that contrast. Maybe we'll do that.
All right. Well, we'll stop there then at verse 20. And Fred, you got a parting shot?
If you don't surrender to Christ, you surrender to chaos.
I like
E.
that.
Stanley Jones.
I like that a lot. Yeah, great. Well, thank you folks for watching, listening. Go ahead and like the podcast if you're up for it, and share it with people. Help us spread the word. We're really grateful for that. And for those of you engaging us and leaving feedback, we really love that. Kind of makes this feel worth it. So if you're up for that, then send us a note on Facebook or Instagram or Twitter or on our website or on YouTube, all those places we are. And we'll do our best to engage you. We're always grateful for that. And man, we got Fred, probably, I don't know, close to 1,000 hours of free stuff on this podcast. Now, I don't know how much, but certainly hundreds and hundreds
of hours. I mean, I can't imagine how many hours we've just done Galatians.
we've it's all free, and it's pretty incredible. We just, by the way, surpassed 500 episodes on the podcast, so that was a
Do you
few
think
weeks
we'll
ago.
ever offer Greek classes?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah,
Would that be kind of fun? I wonder if people would like to learn Greek with us. We're pretty
yeah,
passionate about this kind of stuff.
definitely. I think we
Would
should
we
do it.
would we co-teach, or would we like get in each other's way?
I don't know. We could. I feel like we have some pretty good.
Complimentary.
Yeah, I feel like we complement each other well, and some good. Is it symbiosis the right word? I don't know if that's the right word, but
Mutual respect.
if we were able to plan a little bit ahead of time about what that could look like, and then step out of each other's way when we need to, but then
Yeah, we can do
be
it.
in dialogue when we need to.
Yeah, we
Honestly, I
can do
mean,
it.
there's classes where I've co-taught, like at the grad and undergrad levels. Um, you know, those take a lot of work on the front end to
Yeah.
really make them work. But I've had comments where students in the end are like, I learned more
Mhm.
from just watching the two of you engage each other than I did from the class itself. Like, from the like disposition and way you talk to each other than the content. And so those have been really fun classes to like co-teach with people, and I'm glad I've had opportunities to do that. So I think it could work. Um,
Yeah, I
I
think
know
we
people
could.
are really liking your. Why don't you say a word about that before we leave? Your started another Greek reading class recently. Um,
Yeah, it's going to start up on Tuesday. I might do Tuesday night because there's people
Tuesday
from
at
other
what?
parts of the world that can't make it at noon Eastern time. But if I just switched it to like 7 at night, everyone I think could be happy. Some people would be late at night, some people would be early in the morning. So yeah, that group, the Ephesians
Yeah,
Greek reading group.
yeah.
Yeah, I'm
So
just going to.
what day does that start? What day of the month?
Well, it's going to be after this
September?
is aired, right? It's going to be after this
Yeah.
is aired. So we're in September, but I think it's going to be Tuesdays.
Okay.
So be looking on Facebook groups. I don't
We
know,
should put that on
my
the
Facebook
website, man.
page.
Yeah.
What?
We should put that on the Glows House website.
Definitely. Yeah,
Yeah.
I have no objection to that at all.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's
Yeah.
it's fun. It's kind of like what Michael and I do, but you can participate. You can ask questions live and stuff. Yeah.
I think we should try once a month or once a quarter at least to try to do a live podcast and let people
Yeah.
come in and just be
Oh,
part of the podcast. Yeah.
yeah. I
It'd
think
be
so.
awesome.
I think so. Yeah,
So
it'd be good. Well, thanks, Michael, for all you do, and thanks everyone for listening and watching.
yeah, thanks to Lydia too for her help.
Thank you, Lydia.
She's a huge part of keeping the podcast going. So that's my daughter. Really
Yeah,
grateful for all her help, and
yeah. Thanks, Lydia.
so we're grateful to Jen Noonan, to Mario
Mario.
Melendez, J.M. Smith, others who are on the podcast team as well. They're doing just some awesome stuff in their own respective ministries, but with Close House too. So we're trying to build that. And I'll just say this before we go: that if you're out there and you're listening and you're thinking, man, I'd love to like be on the podcast and maybe have an episode of my own every week, we're open to that. Get in touch with me and I'll talk to you. We'll see if it's a good fit. It could or couldn't be, but um, we're always open to discussing those sorts of things. And
Yeah,
uh,
yeah. I've been interviewed. I know you've been interviewed. I mean, some of this is nitty gritty church polity issues. I
yeah,
meet with pastors. We'll Zoom and talk, and I even have his permission to share that. I need to get that content to you, Michael. But
yeah,
yeah.
excellent. Well, thanks everybody for listening. Share this if you would, and we'll see you next time. Hope that helps.
Interested in growing your ancient language skills but not sure where to start? Glows House can help. From illustrated readers and short stories to lexicons and grammars, Glows House offers a variety of resources for beginning, intermediate, and experienced ancient language learners. Head to glossahouse.com today. Glossa House, language resources for the global community.